My beauty wife and I returned to the past, but I had a headache and didn't know how to avoid her. Just because of our past lives, we hated each other all our lives. Until the day I got into a car accident and passed away forever, she still refused to come see me one last time before she passed away. My daughter asked me if I wanted to leave a message for her mother. I shook my head and said to myself, if I could go back to the day I submitted my college application after the graduation exam, I would never choose to study in the same school as my mother and I again. Having finished speaking, I closed my eyes with tears filled with unwillingness. Maybe God really mercifully let me return to the day I applied for college after the graduation exam. I immediately changed my wishes, choosing the school I always wanted to stay away from Van High. Who would have thought that on the first day of school, before I even entered the school gate, I was pressed against the wall by a familiar figure. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, aggrieved, and said, "Brother, in our previous life our daughter said you didn't want to go to the same school as me. Is that true?" I sat in front of the computer, looked at the application registration website on the screen, and checked the date. I couldn't believe it, shook my head several times, and only after many confirmations did I accept the fact that I had been revived. I returned to the day I submitted my college application after the graduation exam, and was given a second chance by God. This time, I don't want to repeat the same mistake. I glanced at the messages I sent to Van High on my phone. "Van High, which university did you choose? Quickly answer me. I want to go to the same school as you. I want to be with you anytime, anywhere." There were more than a dozen messages in total and only received 4 words in response. "I'm so annoying. Who wants to go to the same school as me?" Looking at these messages, I mocked myself, shook my head, thinking about my past life. Been together for decades without happiness. I don't understand why I pursued her for so long when I was young. People say a dog that licks until the end is no longer a dog's lick, but a deep and meaningful love, which is nonsense. In my previous life, Van High and I were childhood sweethearts. I'm 1 year older than her. I can say I've liked Van High since I was little. I've always been close to her. In high school, I started pursuing her and continued until I graduated from college before she agreed to be with me. But she didn't volunteer. My family and Van High's family are related for many generations. Our grandfathers all knew each other, were sworn brothers. Both came from business families. But Van High's parents died in a car accident. Because there was no one to manage the family's business and outsiders were stalking her, my parents finally helped her family stabilize the situation. Before Van High's grandfather passed away, he was worried about the relationship between the two families, so he let Van High marry me, in order to maintain the relationship between the two families. But at that time, Van High had a boyfriend who was the school's male idol. However, her family situation left her with no other choice but to marry me. My parents asked my opinion, and because I liked her since childhood, of course they completely agreed. I knew she had no relatives left in the world, so after getting married, I treated her conscientiously. But she always treated me with a cold face. Besides the exchanges in daily life, she never said anything else to me. She and I are like 2 roommates living together. Later, she gradually took over the family company, and we talked less and less. She didn't even come home for a whole month and even publicly brought her ex-lover into the company. Because of this, I argued with her countless times. She can smile to outsiders, even to people from rival companies, but to me she is always just a cold face. It's funny, I've never even gone on a date with her. How to go to a movie screening, I still don't know. Holding hands with the person you love while walking down the street is a luxury for me. Every time I asked her to rest with me, to relax, not wanting her to be too tired, she would coldly say, "I'm not a child anymore. I'm an adult, but my mind still thinks about playing around. I don't have time to play with you." Then she turned around and went to a party with her ex-boyfriend. In her eyes, this was just an excuse I was looking for to date her. I don't know what I did wrong. I just ran my own company, was so tired that I was sweating profusely, and still took the time to take care of her. Get up at 6 a.m., cook breakfast for her, and I just eat what she left behind. Then took her to the company because she had a stomachache. I had a kitchen installed in my office. At noon, I didn't take a nap, cooked a nutritious meal for her, then drove an hour to bring it to the company. In the evening, I was on time to pick her up from work. In the eyes of all employees of the 2 companies, we are an exemplary couple, truly a Tian Dong Nok new couple, Countless people admire my happy life. At that time, listening to these rumors, I was actually very happy inside. But in the end, I was just fooling myself. Is it really happy? If we talk about the most intimate act between me and her in my previous life, it was probably the fact that she gave birth to me a daughter, preventing my family from becoming extinct. But in her eyes, this was just a task she completed to repay my parents' kindness. I still remember the day my daughter was born. She handed my daughter to me without any expression on her face and said, "Your kindness has been repaid." Thinking back now, I laugh at myself. Loving her for so long, in return, was just a sentence, "I have paid back your favor." This life cannot be like that anymore. If forced, the fruit will not be sweet, and not only that, it will not quench thirst. I was sorting out my emotions when my mother suddenly came in. "Son, that Ms. Van High said she would enroll in Kindu University of Finance. Although you have enough points for this school, but not much higher, is there any risk?" Previously, I knew Van High would not easily tell me, so I asked my mother to find a way to ask for help. I shook my head. "I won't go to Kindu. I want to go to AI-Con University." My mother looked at me seriously. "What are you talking about? Go to AI-Con? Don't you go to the same school as Van High? You don't love me." Push me out before she finishes her sentence. In my previous life, Van High and I were both accepted by Kindu University of Finance. But in this life, I will not go again. Van High will meet the person she still misses decades after marrying me there. And I also want to go to the university that I missed because of Van High, AI-Con University. My father's alma mater, he also met my mother there. My father often told me that it was a school that brought happiness. I want to go there and see, because in my previous life, until I passed away, I had never felt what happiness was. In this life, I don't want to live miserable anymore. I want to live happier and more joyful. I quickly entered the school name into the computer and without hesitation clicked confirm. My scores far exceed this school's requirements. Plus, this is your first request, so there's no need to worry about not being accepted. Look at the recording system. Just wait quietly for the results. I felt extremely relieved all over my body. This life will no longer have anything to do with Van High. Goodbye, Van High. No, we won't see you again. In the evening, after eating, I lay in bed and looked at plane tickets. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. I thought it was my mother. Unexpectedly, when I opened the door, I saw Van High. Van High's parents passed away early. Her grandfather is busy managing. Company management should be most of the time. She lives at home. I looked at her. "Why are you here?" She has never knocked on my door for 10 years. Van High wanted to stop talking, frowned, and looked at me. After a while, he said, "Why do you want to go?" AI-Con looked back at Van High, 19 years old. I just squinted my eyes. Although she is very beautiful and has countless suitors both at school and in society, it is not an exaggeration to say that any man who sees Van High for the first time will be attracted to her eyes. But now, it seems like she no longer worries me. In my previous life, I had a car accident on the way to find Van High. That day she said she had a business party and would come home very late. As a result, he still hadn't returned by midnight. I called but she didn't answer, texted and didn't respond. Worried that something was wrong with her, I hurried out. At that time, I had a severe cold, my whole body was weak, my head still had a fever, but I still dragged my weakened body out to find her. Then I left while on my way to find her. When I was taken to the hospital, only my daughter was by my side. Her daughter called Van High countless times, but she still didn't answer. Finally, when I was about to die, my daughter, worried that I would die, told me that Van High had gone to a party with her ex-boyfriend. At that moment, I was still barely breathing, but in the end I immediately ran out of strength, and my belief in wanting to see Van High before I passed away was also shattered. Thinking of this, my heart aches. Looking back at Van High, my eyes became cold. "You manage where I go and what I do. Don't you want me to go to school with you? I did what you wanted. I won't bother you anymore, and I hope you don't appear in my sight either." She looked surprised and was about to open her mouth to say something, but I didn't give her a chance and directly slammed the door. I took a few deep breaths to calm down and no longer think about these messy things. In the middle of the night, while sleeping, my father woke me up and pulled me to the living room. Van High was sitting on the sofa, sobbing. My father's face was black, and he questioned me. "What are you doing, dear son? What about Van High? Let her go to Capital University alone. Quickly change your wish and go to Capital University with Van High. Don't you like her? Can you leave her alone outside? Looking at Van High's red eyes from crying. If it were my previous life, I would have felt extremely sad. As long as I can make her happy, even if I have to cut off a piece of her body to make soup for her to drink, I'm willing. But now, I don't have any pity for her in my heart. I just spoke in a slightly loud voice, but she couldn't stand it. You have to know that, in her previous life, her tone when talking to me was much heavier than the one I had just now. Thinking of this, anger flared up in my heart, and I argued directly with my father. My mother heard the commotion and rushed to the living room, but she stood by my father's side and criticized me with him. My mother pulled my father back, blocking his face and telling me not to argue with him. Even though she quarreled with me, her son, my mother still protected my father. Even though I was scolded, what disappointed me more was that in my previous life, when I had conflicts with others, Van High never opened her mouth to help me say a word, even helping others slander me. At that time, I really wanted Van High to stand next to me, even if it was just to help me glare at the other person, but it never happened. It seems like in my previous life I failed miserably. Even my lover was not on my side. No, this is just my one-sided wish in Van High's eyes. When did she ever consider me her lover? I, with scary red eyes, started sobbing. Maybe I'm always alone. My parents saw that something was wrong with me and came to care. Son, what's wrong with you? Don't scare me, Mom. What happened in the end? Tell Mom. I shook my head, just feeling a little dizzy. Van High saw that I was unstable, so she also stood up and wanted to help me. I pushed her hand away, looking at her cold face. I am extremely disgusted. Then, I looked at my parents, my voice extremely determined. Parents, no matter what happens in this life, I will not go to Kindu University. I have decided to choose wisdom and in the future, stop setting me up with Van High. The person she likes has never been me, and I don't want to continue liking her anymore. I don't want to see her again after this. Hearing me say that, Van High's face showed extreme shock. Her eyes opened wide as she looked at me. She also didn't expect that I had been pursuing her for more than 10 years. Then suddenly one day, I stopped pursuing her. If you love someone, you'll pursue that person, but I won't serve you anymore. I snorted coldly, turned back to my room, picked up my suitcase, and left the house in the middle of the night. Behind me came the sound of my father scolding me for being a bad boy. In the background, there was also the sound of Van High crying. In my heart, I laughed coldly. What's worth crying about? Doesn't she always hate me, always find me annoying? I satisfied her and took the initiative to leave. Isn't that good? I took a taxi to the train station. Because it was late at night, there were no plane tickets left. Today, even if I have to take the train, I don't want to see Van High anymore. There were no beds left, so I had to buy a hard seat ticket. I must say, sitting stiffly for more than 10 hours is quite uncomfortable, but compared to the pain of decades in my previous life, these 10 hours are nothing. Upon arrival, I rented a room near the university. After a quick cleaning, I went to the school to take a look and breathe in the university atmosphere. I feel my soul relax. The first day, there was no Van High. My mood is much better. Life from now on can only get better and better. These days, besides eating and sleeping, I just get acquainted with school. During that time, I met a sister, an upperclassman. She knew I didn't have my admission results yet, but came first to get acquainted with the school. Very dissatisfied with my confidence. In fact, even if I don't get accepted, I will still stay at AICon. Because all my wishes are for this university. Even though I was only in college, I didn't listen to my father's advice to go to Kindu. The senior was very enthusiastic, sometimes took me out, invited me to dinner, and took me for a walk. Because I was not used to the climate and soil, I caught a cold. She even specially brought me cold medicine. The landlady knew I was coming from far away and often brought me food. Just for 1 month. I felt AI's warmth. This makes me feel even more that my choice in this life is completely right. Very quickly, the admission results came out. No surprise, I was accepted. I happily invited my senior sister to have dinner with me. I rode the small electric car I just bought to the school gate to pick her up. She brought me a glass of milk tea. We talked for a while, and then I prepared to take her out to eat. Suddenly, she smiled at me. Do you have a girlfriend yet? I was stunned and shook my head. No, I've been single since birth. She pointed to the opposite direction. There, she's here. That little girl stood there, looking at him for a long time. Then looking at her eyes, it seemed like she knew he saw someone coming. My face immediately darkened. Because that's Van High. What are you doing here? My voice isn't very good. Van Hai looked at Tuet. Her expression was a bit complicated, then said to me, I came to visit you. I'm afraid you're not used to the climate and soil, so I brought you some dishes from home. Having finished speaking, she gave me a thermos lunchbox. In my hands, I was first stunned, then couldn't help but laugh coldly. Look at me, it's unbelievable. Her mouth as cold as -18 degrees can say words of concern for me. The senior sister crossed her arms and said to me, and she said she's not your girlfriend, coming from so far away to visit you. I shook my head. She's really not my girlfriend, just a normal friend I grew up with. Van Hai was stunned after hearing this. The lunchbox in her hand fell to the ground. I didn't pay attention to her and told my senior, Let's go eat. Just as I was about to leave with my sister, Van Hai suddenly grabbed my hand and pulled me in another direction. What are you doing? I pulled my hand away from her. She fell to the ground. Her knees were scraped and bleeding. She let out a scream. From her expression, it was clear that she was in pain but didn't say anything. Standing up, she grabbed me again. Not knowing where she got the strength from, she pulled me under a tree. I pulled away from her hand again, impatiently said, Van Hai, that's enough. Didn't I say it clearly enough last time? I won't be entangled with you anymore. You can rest assured to go to school in the capital. Why did you come to me? Van Hai looked at me with red eyes, tears flowing down the corners of her eyes. That's how. You clearly weren't like that in your previous life. In this life, why do you treat me like that? I stood there stunned. She also flashes back to the past, recalling her previous manifestations. I should have thought of this, but it's better to say it clearly. Van Hai, we were both unhappy in our past lives. You also married me because of your grandfather's will. In this life, you don't need it anymore. You have memories of your past life, enough to stabilize your company, and you don't need my family's help. You can rest assured, go to study at Capital University, continue with the ex-lover you always miss. Let's not continue to torture each other. Having finished speaking, I didn't wait for her to answer. I left directly and took my senior sister out to dinner. At the dinner table, she saw that I was not in a good mood, so she asked about the matter between me and Van Hai. In 2 lifetimes, I never had anyone to confide in, so I told her about the relationship between me and Van Hai in this life. After listening, she just said, Do you think she doesn't dislike you, but is just a bit slow? After all, her parents are gone, lacking love. I shook my head, smiling bitterly. How is that possible? Stop joking. Lacking love? Don't I love her enough? I'm even willing to tell her the news. If she lacks love, then what is love? Cruel fate. Past life. This life, I will not repeat it. Very quickly, the first day of school arrived. I asked my mother to send me the admission notice. Unexpectedly, my mother sent 2, one from Van Hai. She enrolled in the same university as me, dropping out of Kindu University. Suddenly, I felt a bit dizzy. Why? Why does she clearly never love me, and in this life come to bother me like this? There was a knock on the door, and I knew Van Hai had arrived. With my parents' abilities, they can very easily find out my whereabouts. Opening the door, Van Hai was wearing a backpack and standing at the door. I looked at her coldly. In my previous life, I sacrificed my life for you, even though you never loved me. There's no need to bother me like that, right? Van Hai looked at me, tears in her eyes. Can you give me a chance to explain? Impossible. I firmly refused. Van Hai, in my past life I liked you very much and loved you very much, but that's all about the past life. From the day I went looking for you and got into an accident, my love for you was also lost. In this life, whether you repent or anything else, I don't care anymore. I just hope you disappear from my world. Is that okay? Van Hai cried until her eyes turned red. She came forward and hugged me tightly. No, I don't want to leave you. Her tears wet my shirt. Looking at her crying nonstop, if I said I didn't have any feelings in my heart, that would be impossible. Anyway, I have loved her for decades. If in my previous life she responded to me, even just a little, in this life, even if I have to repeat the same mistakes, I am still willing to love her for another life. Unfortunately, a broken heart is very difficult to mend. I pushed her away and said, You stay in this room. I'll rent a new place. Having finished speaking, I walked out. Van Hai cried and called after me. Thatch how? I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. In this life, I won't be stupid anymore. I sighed. Now what's the use? Because I didn't want to stay too far from school, I found a new room in the neighborhood. But this also keeps me away from Van Hai. It was no surprise. Less than a day after moving into the new house, Van Hai knew. Don't know where she got the key. I just woke up. She already made breakfast for me. I want to call home and scold my parents. If they knew that in my previous life I left because of Van Hai, would they regret their current actions? Just keep forcing me into a corner so that the tragedy on my body will repeat itself again. Van Hai saw me waking up, smiled and said, I made dumplings for you. Eat quickly. I glanced at it, threw the dumpling directly into the trash, then took a sandwich from the refrigerator to eat. She wasn't angry. She just picked up the dumplings from the trash, brushed the dust off it, and ate it herself. Anger flared up inside me. I dropped the dumpling in her hand. Are you sick? If you're so dirty, what else can you eat? I just hit a little hard. Van Hai rubbed her hands, which were slightly red and swollen, but still had a smile on her face. It's okay to be dirty. You can eat it. I'm not that whiny. The smile she gave to others, I experienced it for the first time in my previous life. This makes me feel uncomfortable. Is this almsgiving, or is there some other intention? What does she really have in mind for me? What do I have for her to calculate? Today is the day to register for admission. I didn't want to argue with her, took the admission notice, and left the house to go to school. I'm looking for a homeroom teacher to register. Not long after, Van Hai also came, and was even in the same major in class as me. Does she have to cling to me like that? At the first class meeting, the homeroom teacher asked all students to come up on stage to introduce themselves. I introduced briefly. It was Van Hai's turn. She held the microphone, her eyes looking towards me. When I heard it, I immediately got goosebumps. Bad feeling. Van Hai suddenly opened her mouth. Actually, at first I wanted to go to Kindu University, but I still chose to go to this school because of the person I love. Pryor said his biggest regret was not going to AICon to study at university. So, in this life, I gave up Kindu University and came here to find him. In my previous life, I unintentionally did many things to hurt him, but that's not what I meant. He always thinks I don't love him, but in my heart I only have him. So, in this life, let me make it up to you, okay? Because I was the one who introduced myself right away, everyone still remembered my name before, so they all looked towards me. Everyone had a look of admiration in their eyes. An extremely beautiful girl, pursuing me, gave up Kindu University to come here. Even though what Van Hai said was true, everyone thought she just made up this story to add romance. Facing everyone's eyes, my face turned pale. I couldn't bear it anymore. Under everyone's expectant eyes, I stood up and left. Before leaving, he said one thing. Are you sick? Having finished speaking, I glared at Van Hai angrily. To avoid Van Hai, I didn't even go back to the rented room anymore. I stayed directly at the dormitory. But very quickly, I became famous in school, on the front page of school news. There are 2 messages in total. The first news is that Van Hai was voted the top beauty queen of the first year with her beauty. This rating is completely deserved. The second news, an ordinary college student refused to confess to this year's first-year beauty queen. That ordinary college student is me. There is even a video of me scolding Van Hai for being sick. Immediately, I became the topic of discussion after meals for all students. No one understood why I rejected such a beautiful girl and even romantically prepared a heartfelt confession. They think I'm a eunuch. Otherwise, who can refuse? Every time I hear people discuss this, I sigh. I can't explain it. Initially, the desire to come to AICon made me relax my mind and body, and my whole body felt better. But since Van Hai arrived, those peaceful days are no longer there. I thought Van Hai was clinging to me mainly because she was sorry, but since her ex-lover, Lam Pham, appeared, I realized I was thinking too much. Friday afternoon, after school, I planned to go home. When I arrived at the school gate, I saw Lam Pham and Van Hai talking and laughing happily, extremely friendly. Lam Pham even reached out to stroke Van Hai's hair. They didn't look like they had just met, but like a couple in love who had been together for a long time. Van Hai also saw me at the same time, her expression extremely panicked. I sarcastically said, less than a month after school started, you quickly found someone to come here. Van Hai, don't you think you're hypocritical and cowardly? One side confessed to me in front of the whole class, while the other side kept contacting Lam Pham, whom you don't even know. Van Hai quickly ran to hold my hand and explained, Thatch how? I've heard enough from you. I forcefully pushed her away, almost making her fall. Luckily, Lam Pham caught her from behind. Then, he turned to look at me, a smile on his face, and reached out to me. You are Thatch Howe, the person Van Hai often mentioned in front of me, right? Let's get acquainted. I coldly looked at my former love rival. There's no need to get to know each other. No need to get to know each other. After Van Hai finished speaking, I passed them and walked towards the opposite street. Sure, how? Can't you listen to what I say every time? Van Hai's voice rang out from behind. At this time, I went to the other corner. I saw a black car coming, not far away, with no signs of slowing down, but I had absolutely no time to avoid it. I feel my heart beating faster. At that moment, a feeling of being pushed from behind came. I was pushed away by someone and fell into the flower bush in front. The black car sped past. My leg was bleeding, but I didn't pay attention to the pain and quickly turned around to look at Van Hai. The next moment, I stood still, my body trembling. Van Hai lay in a pool of blood, her whole body soaked in blood, her white dress dyed red. I quickly ran to help her up, but didn't dare because I didn't know if touching her now would cause more damage. Lam Pham next to him was extremely worried and quickly called 120, telling me to stay and watch. And he chased after the car that caused the accident and ran away. Van Hai saw me kneeling in front of her, raised my bloody arm, held my hand very weakly, and said to me, Thatch Howe, this time I changed it to you leaving for me. Can you forgive me yet? I didn't say anything, just my eyes were red. Van Hai continued, Thatch Howe, actually I don't have an ex-lover. Up until now, you have misunderstood Lam Pham. He is my half-brother. I suddenly understood. This idiot. Van Hai, her face covered in blood, smiled and looked at me. In your previous life, do you know why I was always cold towards you? I thought you didn't love me. You were wrong. Whether it was my previous life or this life, I only loved you. My mother died while giving birth to me, and my father married a stepmother. As a result, when I was 5 years old, my father and stepmother who took me out together had a car accident and died. After that, my grandfather had terminal cancer and passed away. Teacher, the fortune teller said I'm a lonely star. Everyone around me is in trouble. After my parents and grandfather passed away, I'm so afraid that one day you won't be there anymore, so I don't dare to show how much we love each other. Van Hai is really heartbroken. Van Hai really wanted to hug him and say out loud that Van Hai loved him, but Van Hai didn't dare. Van Hai doesn't want you to be in danger. I hope you're safe. In my previous life, after my death, the whole world, my world is dark. My daughter didn't even give me an urn for your remains. Did you know? I lived alone in confusion for 3 years, and finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I miss you. I really miss you. I drank a bottle of sleeping pills to find you. I didn't expect to be able to return to the past, but I'm still scared in this life. However, when that night you said you didn't want to like me anymore, I knew you had returned. I was still worried that my bad luck would harm you, so I didn't dare tell you. But now Van Hai is not afraid anymore. Van Hai is really about to leave. Before I die, I must tell you. That's how Van Hai loves you. Van Hai really loves him. Van Hai stroked my face one last time, then her hand dropped. No, Van Hai, don't sleep. I won't let you sleep. I screamed, my voice hoarse. Doctor, where are you? Along with my screams, the ambulance arrived at the hospital. Van Hai was taken to the emergency room. I stood outside the door, extremely nervous, even slapped myself a few times. If Van Hai is really no more, then what will this life do? Van Hai, nothing should happen to you. I thought to myself, you always love me, as long as you're okay. Very quickly, my parents took the earliest flight to arrive. As soon as I arrived at the hospital, my father slapped me. You disobedient boy. If Van Hai has any fate, see how I can handle you. My whole body was covered in Van Hai's blood, looking towards the operating room. I smiled. After all, I had already committed suicide once, so I wasn't afraid of dying again. If Van Hai goes, I will go with her. My mother was frightened by my words and quickly grabbed me. Son, Van Hai won't be far away. Don't do anything foolish. Half an hour later, the operating room door opened. A nurse came out and called out. The patient lost a lot of blood and needs a blood transfusion. She is blood type O. Who has this blood type? I immediately panicked because the people present were not. Suddenly, Lam Pham ran up from the hospital hallway, quickly shouting, I have it. Finally, Lam Pham gave Van Hai a blood transfusion. Van Hai escaped danger to her life. Lam Pham came out, his face pale because he was tired from chasing the car that caused the accident. Now he had to draw several large tubes of blood. His whole body looked like a deflated balloon. I quickly went to help Lam Pham, who was walking unsteadily and full of guilt. Sorry. Lam Pham shook his head, trying to force a smile. Don't think of me as a rival anymore. I'm your future brother-in-law. Van Hai has not regained consciousness since the surgery. For 3 consecutive days, I stayed up in front of the hospital bed, not eating or drinking, not leaving her side for a moment. Looking at her on the hospital bed like a sleeping princess, I kept praying in my heart. Even though I can only live 50 years in this life, I only need to exchange it for Van Hai's awakening. Thinking and thinking, I fell asleep. I felt someone caressing my face. I woke up startled, raised my head to look at Van Hai, who was looking at me and also caressing my face with her hand. I was extremely moved. Van Hai, you're awake. Van Hai's voice was very small. I've been awake for a long time. Keep stroking my face. I quickly put Van Hai's hand back on my face. Just stroke freely. Van Hai smiled. Her smile was very beautiful. Since then, I have a little girlfriend who likes to laugh with me. 4 years later, at the graduation ceremony, I looked everywhere for Van Hai's sign, but could not find it. I'm extremely worried. Today I had a big thing to do and was about to propose to her, but at this moment a figure wearing a wedding dress slowly walked in front of me, looking at me with affection. That's how quickly marry me. The next moment, I took out a wedding ring from my pocket and got down on one knee. Lovely Princess Van Hai, do you agree to marry me? Van Hai smiled brightly like a shooting star and shouted loudly. Agreed. Van Hai agrees to marry Thatch Hao. Life can give us a second chance, but only true hearts know how to appreciate their own happiness. Therefore, love while you can and don't let misunderstandings obscure the path to each other's hearts. As my grandfather once said, love is a university that brings happiness, and indeed, this place gave us the most precious gift, a love that transcends time, a future we can build together, and a perfect family that both of our lives longed for.